right. Hello, everybody. How's it going? How are you, Bob?
I'm doing great. I'm in Dallas for an IT and cybersecurity um, conference. So in the hotel room right now doing this, but we're all set. We're good to go. And it's a great time down here.
Awesome.
And it's a nice sunny day. So
Yeah,
always
can't
happy about that.
complain. Cannot complain about that. All right. Well, for anyone that is new here, these are our Ironside Office Hour sessions. We do them bi-weekly. I'm Paris Williams. I'm the MC for these bi-weekly sessions, joined here with Bob Miller, the owner of Ironside IT Partners. Each session starts with a brief topic, and then we open the floor for Q&A. So at any time, you can submit a question in the Q&A box. We also have a form on our website if you want to submit questions in advance or topics that you want us to cover. Each session is recorded and posted to our YouTube channel, usually by the end of the day. So I'll make sure I put the link to our YouTube channel in the chat. And today's topic is Your business wasn't targeted, it was available. Bob is going to cover the session topic and answer your questions. So, Bob, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Paris. I'm going to share my presentation. Can you see that okay? I'm on a different machine than I usually
Yep.
use. Great. Thanks. Good. So I love this topic because this comes up in conversation all the time, whether it's with a new customer, somebody who's not yet a customer, a decades old customer, family members. It doesn't matter. This comes up all the time. So we call this your business wasn't targeted. It was available um, because the reality is that you weren't chosen most of the time. And I get this a lot. So these are some really common things that I hear practically every week. Why would anybody target us? We're too small. We don't have anything hackers would want, or some variation of that, of one of these three things. Why would anyone target us? We're too small. Well, I think some of this comes from like watching movies. And we know how unrealistic movies are, especially modern movies. And so let's game this out a little bit. What mo might have you seen in a movie? One, hackers pick a company. Two, they plan a sophisticated attack, and it's extra sexy if it's a casino. And then three, they execute with precision. And of course, they have the obligatory goofy sidekick for comic relief. And that's kind of how what the movie template is. And that's kind of what people think about a little bit, right? I might be exaggerating a little bit, but generally you're thinking of hackers pick a company, name some big, large company that we know of in America. And then they plan this great sophisticated attack. They finally break in, lots of lines of code on the screen and all kinds of fancy things happening, really fast typing on a keyboard, probably by an actor who doesn't know how to type. And then they execute really, really well with maybe some hijinks along the way, but then that's what happens. But that's really not the reality. What is the reality is that hackers scan for vulnerabilities. And guess what? It's not even hackers, it's their bots. That's who's doing the scanning. And they're scanning all across the internet. That's one way they get in. Another way in is that they buy access that already exists. They buy it on the cybercrime marketplace on the dark web. There's another office hours we did on the dark web. You can go to our YouTube channel, go back and watch that again for some more information. Or three, hackers exploit the easiest and softest target that's out there on the internet. The cybercrime marketplace. What are we buying on the cybercrime marketplace if we're a bad guy? Well, we're buying VPN access. That's a big thing, particularly if it's SSL VPN. Another thing, which blows my mind, but still happens, is that RDP credentials are available for sale on the marketplace on the dark web. RDP is a really uh, uh, very poor way to connect in remotely from home or from the office into home and easily exploitable, easily able to break through those built-in like entering your password and things like that. It's very insecure. And so we never want to have that available to the public internet. I'm going to step aside from the presentation to just say that right now, never, ever, ever, ever have that available to the public internet. whatsoever, but a lot of companies still do. And those are easily purchased on the cybercrime marketplace. Another thing is admin accounts. Um, say you're domain administrator or maybe even worse, your Microsoft 365 administrator. Let's not compare how bad two bad things are. Let's just say that they're both very, very bad. And the thing is that these things can be purchased for around $1,300. So think about that. You have hackers out there that find some sort of opening into your business, your whole company is now available for $1,300. That's it. Your livelihood, everything. Once access is purchased, then that's when they go through and they start doing things that you already know about. They have ransomware. They start doing some data theft, or they go in and they start shutting down systems and ransoming that. Sometimes they'll do things like public exposure. They'll out you publicly, which is a PR nightmare. Point is, once access is purchased, once they've got access, um, it's kind of we're kind of close to endgame here. And the thing is that size doesn't matter. But seriously, it doesn't matter. Big companies, there's nothing special about them at all. Anyone can get breached because access already existed. There we go. And the reason why access already existed is because everything is automated. Vulnerabilities are scanned constantly and globally. I mean, we're talking thousands of attempts, thousands of firewalls, of PC servers, thousands at one time. So it's easy to start scanning the public internet. You would be amazed if you saw the logs that is in just a regular small business company, what their firewall logs show for the scanning, all of the different attempts to try to break in. It is nonstop, it is ongoing, it is constant. So the victims become simply whoever's available. That's it. If there's a vulnerability, they got you. That's it. That's what their goal is. Now, especially after a vulnerability is published, we have another office hours about this from a couple of months ago, I think it was back in January, perhaps, where we talked about the importance of patching your systems. And the reason why is particularly after a new vulnerability is found and it's published and everybody knows about it. And now Microsoft and, maybe Adobe, some of these other companies, they issue patches. You're most vulnerable from that vulnerability, that from being exploited, from that vulnerability being exploited. You're most vulnerable in the days after that vulnerability is published because now everybody knows that that vulnerability exists, but you haven't patched it yet. And so we've got one vulnerability, thousands of scans every second happening. And what they're doing is the equivalent of opening thousands of unlocked doors all at once. It's like they've got a master key and they can just break in and they're just looking for whoever the master key fits. And when you can do thousands of firewalls, thousands of PCs, thousands of servers, whatever, when you can do thousands of those at once, you can get through the internet pretty quickly. Small and medium businesses are prime targets. And the reason why is because they have lower budgets, they're easier to access, they're less monitored than larger companies. And the thing is that at scale, they're valuable. Now, they're valuable anyway because they have assets. They definitely do. There's money in the bank account. Um, but particularly at scale, they're valuable. But here's the real value. It's not even that. It's that once a small business is breached, business email compromise, server compromise, workstations with lateral movement, take your pick. Once a business is breached, the attackers can then start moving to their customers and vendors. And you might ask yourself, well, how do they do that? They could do phishing right from your Microsoft 365 tenant. They can attach viruses to your emails. There's a lot, man, there are a lot of different ways. There are hundreds and hundreds of ways that they can attack your vendors and your customers from your network. And they can get into your entire supply chain. the supply chain that you're part of. So vendors are entry points. You might just be the entry point, but the relationship that you have with your customers or your vendors, that's the leverage. That gives extra, it's an extra layer um, of friction that they can avoid in order to get somebody to open up a phishing email, for example. If it comes from Mary Sue and you know Mary Sue and it's her actual email address with her actual signature, and maybe it's more brief than Mary Sue usually talks, but you know her and she has an action and say, hey, I've got this file I need to share with you with an update to the bank account information. You click on it, you're much more likely to click on that because you just talked to Mary Sue yesterday because you have a trusted relationship with her. So it's leverage. And then the breach starts spreading when it goes from you to your vendor or your customer, and then it starts bouncing around. So the breach spreads, but so does your liability since you were part of the problem or maybe the genesis of the problem, which significantly increases your legal liability for their breach since it started with you, because you might just be the doorway to someone else. So, how do we reduce some of that risk? Well, there are some really basic things to do. Patch systems, patch them, keep those patches updated. It's absolutely critical. It is very complicated, though. It's not as easy as going to Windows Update and just running updates. It can be. You could simply have people go around and run Windows updates and then check on them and things like that. But you have to do that with Adobe. You have to do that with Google Chrome. You have to do that with Microsoft Edge. You have to do that with Firefox. You have to do that with everything. They have to be kept up to date. And it does get a little more complicated because sometimes those patches break things. So, so we do a lot of patch management for clients where we take that burden on and we help them keep their systems patched. But we have an automated system where sometimes we wait a few days or maybe a week to make sure that if it's buggy, then other companies report those bugs and they get resolved before the patch gets applied to your system. Where some of those patches can be rolled back and repaired, different things like that. So talk to us if you need help with that. But on the whole, patch your systems. Another one is password management. I say this almost every office hours, I think, almost. It is absolutely critical to have your passwords in its own separate password vault out of Google Chrome, out of passwords.xlsx, literally every single day on our system, our managed detection and response system reports when employees open up password files, such as passwords.xlsx or .docx or something like that, or an open text file. And then we report that to you literally every day across our client base. We get reports of that. So we're talking to somebody every single day. That's how common it is, even with customers who have password management. So I implore you, use password management vault. Keep your passwords in there and don't keep them in an Excel file or Google Chrome. Enforce MFA. I know it's a pain in the neck. I think Microsoft at this point kind of requires everybody for the Microsoft 365. So you're probably doing it there, but you really need to do it everywhere. Universal MFA enforcement, no matter what, even if it's for dumb stuff, because you would be shocked at what threat actors can use and how they can start moving from one system to another and linking them together and gaining and elevating their access to things that are truly critical. MDR and ITDR, I talk about this one a lot too, managed detection and response, which secures your endpoints, and ITDR, identity threat detection and response, which secures Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace. And they look for at those endpoints and those mailboxes. They look for behavior that seems kind of hackery. And then that's a 24-hour, 7-day a week security operations center that then reports to us, and then we reach out to clients and in some cases we just start doing mitigation tactics. Other cases we reach out to your IT department. Depends on the relationship that you have with us. Email security, fundamental, absolutely essential. It filters your email prior to arriving in your mailbox for phishing, malware, things like that. So we really want that filtered in advance. That is some of the most basic stuff to do. And security awareness training. Security awareness training is good because it helps employees to prepare. It helps employees to understand what the threats are, and it gives them really basic, good, practical advice on how to be aware. But security awareness training's biggest benefit for you is that it shows due diligence that you're training your employees to be good cyber citizens. And security awareness training then shows that you're not being negligent in that area. So even if an employee makes a mistake, which they're humans, they will, the organization is doing what it should do to be a good partner in the supply chain. Ultimately, though, what we need to take away from this entire presentation, this office hours, is that it is a mindset shift because you're not too small. It doesn't matter. You can be a one person company. You will be scanned. You will be accessed. It will happen. A breach will happen. It is a guarantee. You are 17 times more likely in something like the next 12 months to have a breach than to have a speeding ticket. The statistics are unbelievably crazy. And so your job is to show due diligence, make yourself a hard target, meaning don't make it easy for them to break into your company. Do everything to protect your company, and then prove that you're doing everything to protect your company. Because it's not enough just to simply do the stuff. If you can't prove that you've done it, and then there are consequences, they say there's a breach, there's an incident like that. If you can't prove that you've done the stuff to try to prevent the breach, then you don't have a legal framework of protection for your company in the event that a breach moves to a customer or a vendor. Or if you're in a regulated industry, same thing. So now we'll open it up to any questions about anything that I've talked about today, or frankly, anything at all. These are office hours, so you can ask me anything. I can do some home improvement stuff, but we generally try to keep it to IT and cybersecurity. So anything along those lines, any questions whatsoever, Paris?
Yep, we do have some questions. The first one is, okay, but how likely is this really?
Well, it's going to happen. So how likely it is depends on how how much you do to protect your company. So one of the things that we look at, one of the things we often do with clients and prospects, and is we go through a level one penetration test, and that will show some real world data of what is accessible to threat actors because it was accessible to us. And so we can give you a report on that and then show you what we found. A lot of times we find passwords. We find that all the time, actually. But there's a lot of other stuff that we find too. And so it's helpful to know what is available to a threat actor. What could they get in a certain type of attack? So, the goal of doing that is to assess your risk, which is impact and likelihood. So what is, things that are super high impact and super high likelihood, we address those first. We make recommendations to do that. And then you start to reduce your risk exposure for the bad guys out there. So the answer is, I don't know. And you probably don't either, and that might be a problem. I would suggest finding out because the more that they can do, the more that they will do, and the faster you'll get breached. You're going to get breached. And so it's also a matter not just of reducing that surface area where they can breach you, but also once breached, reducing the damage that they can do once you're breached. And also increasing how fast you can find out that you have been breached. The average is 206 days from when a network is breached to when we find out that the network has been breached. That number has been the same for 8 years. It doesn't show any signs of changing because the threat actors become more savvy as protections become more well-rounded. Um, so we want to have protections in place where we can identify a threat actor has breached the network as soon as possible. And very often, especially with business email compromise, we can identify that within minutes, which is, it helps me sleep at night. That's for sure. So,
If our access is being sold, how would we know?
that's hard to know that your access is being sold. There are some dark web scans. Um, that can get a little bit dubious when we're talking about just access, though, which is the thing we truly care about. Most dark web scanning looks out for passwords and things like that. Well, we can manage passwords more effectively than just access. So generally, what I say is that your cybersecurity strategy should always be morphing. It should always be top of mind. And you should always, you should frankly have not just a budget for now, but also you should have a way to modify that strategy for the future. So if you're a client of ours, for example, um, we do quarterly security briefings. And once, if you're a new client and you're going through onboarding, then one of the last things we do is get you started with quarterly security briefings. Where actually Paris and I were just talking about some modifications to the way that we do quarterly security briefings. Um, but the point of a quarterly security briefing is to have an awareness of you, the business owner or IT professional of the company, to know what are the current threats that are out there that you should be aware of. It doesn't mean necessarily that there are actionable items every quarter or anything like that, for sure. No, but what it does mean is that we want you to be as prepared and as knowledgeable as possible because we care about your company. We care about what these bad guys do to us all the time. They do it all the time to us, especially us small and medium businesses, because most of us we're just trying to make a living for our families. That's what we're doing. And so at Ironside, we're very passionate about helping to protect small and medium businesses from the threat actors. I have no idea what the original question was. I kind of got, I don't know if I answered it. If I didn't, repeat it to me, but if I did, let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, you're good. How can we secure the business without it costing so much?
Well, I mean, so cost really depends on risk. What's the likelihood and what's the impact that's custom to your unique business. Now, there are some fundamental things that every company has to do, which, make sure I've got that selected here, is here. And there's a couple other things that are on this list too. This is absolutely fundamental. And so a lot of times with organizations, we'll just go through and we'll assess these things right here, at a bare minimum. Because antivirus used to be the bare minimum, and antivirus now, while you need to have antivirus comes with Windows. I mean, you know, it's basic, it's there, it's everywhere. And so because of that, nobody, Windows and Macs, by the way, both Windows and Mac, they both have built-in antivirus that's remarkably effective. And because it's remarkably effective, nobody tries to spread viruses around anymore. But you still need to have it because viruses are still a component used by some threat actors. And so, you know, so point is that we look with you at what is the most likely way that a threat actor is going to come in. What is the greatest impact of a threat actor? And then kind of build out what those expenses are. So it doesn't have to be expensive. It really kind of depends on your business and what you do, how large you are, what's the distribution, what type of things do you do? Are you covered by cybersecurity liability insurance and therefore have certain promises and requirements? Are you covered by some regulatory agencies and therefore have legal responsibilities? So there, it's a whole bunch of things to look at. But again, it doesn't have to be expensive. I will say this though. We just recently had a prospect in the last week that wasn't quite sure what they wanted to do with a proposal that we'd sent over for cybersecurity, and they had a hacking attempt, well, a successful hacking attempt in the last week, and they signed that right away. Unfortunately, there's a lot of remediation efforts that are actually still going on today. Um, you know, you know, multiple days after the incident. So it gets a breach is extraordinarily expensive. Cybersecurity, not so much. Paris.
Are you sure targeted attacks don't happen? We get them all the time.
Well, um, yeah. So targeted attacks definitely happen, especially. So usually targeted attacks happen though once your company has been found to be available, and once you kind of have gotten a threat actor's eye, or there are multiple entries for your company on the dark web, which means you just have a lot of activity. And so you can definitely become targeted. And if that happens, I would take that very seriously. It's not something to just say, oh, we're targeted now. Good thing we have email security. No, actually, if you're targeted, then that is not the only way that they are attacking you. If email is how you believe that you're being targeted, there could be a lot of different other things. It's not just going to be email, it's going to be a multi-vector approach. And so looking at the different vectors, super, super critical in protecting your company because they don't just do one way. They do lots of ways if you're truly targeted. Paris.
What's the biggest vulnerability you see in small businesses right now?
It's kind of shifting right now. That's a good question because it's been email for a long time. And probably still is. And by email, I mean either uh, email security inbound, where we're protecting against phishing and things like that. Um, or I mean business email compromise, where they're breaking into your Microsoft 365 account. And that one's probably the number one thing right now is business email compromise into Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace accounts. And then from there, finding either other avenues to access or just simply spreading to other companies using yours to spread. It's probably the biggest thing. However, SSL VPN is probably right up there, pretty early. I mentioned that earlier in the spreadsheet, and I mentioned it a couple of other times because while it's very, very popular and it's really, it's great to have remote access into your network. It sure is. While all that is true, SSL VPN is fundamentally um, a it's hard to overcome. It's hard to secure it. It's hard to secure it. We're only a couple minutes away from ending, so I won't wax on that one. But it is hard to secure SSL VPN. So that one's probably a third in third place, but it's happening a lot.
How do we know what is exposed for hackers?
Um, well, uh, you don't. So some unless you have a cybersecurity expert on staff, or you have penetration testing done on a regular basis, which I always recommend. And if you have cybersecurity insurance, they generally require that. If you're in a regulated industry, they absolutely require it. If you have to do PCI compliance, absolutely required. So I'm a huge proponent of quarterly security scanning because it tells you that information. So that's really the only way to know, though, is if you have a quarterly penetration test done, and then you review those every 3 months and see where you are because vulnerability unpatched systems, new patches come out. I mean, it's an ever changing world, like daily changing. So quarterly security vulnerability and penetration testing is crucial for that.
Okay, that was our last question, and we are right at time.
Wow,
So
great.
thank you everyone for joining. This session recording will be posted to our YouTube channel by the end of today. Our next session is going to be on April 22nd. You can join using the same link that you used today, and we will see you then. Thanks, everyone. Bye.